All right, greetings, everybody. So we've got 1 hour, and unfortunately, I have a hard stop at noon. So my purpose of this is really exploration still, to make sure that I'm interpreting the interests of the members in the industry correctly. So just make sure everybody is on the same page. We were up at an adaptive user group meeting. Adaptive is the metadata manager for our ontology as well. One of the conversations was about how do we explain metadata. It's kind of funny because one of my board members told me very clearly, never use the words ontology and metadata in polite company. They don't sell well. Those are ideas that scare people. And now as data becomes more and more important, we got to figure out how to manage metadata, talk about it with business, talk about it with management, and ensure that it is understood for the important activity that it is. So as we were discussing that at the adaptive meeting, I think it was Beth or Samra from Fannie Mae stood up and said, hey, we have this new data management maturity model by the EDM Council. Is this something that we can start applying to the issues of metadata so that we can mature in our processes, measure things consistently, et cetera, et cetera? So based on that, we opened up a couple of bottles of wine. We took a 3-hour train trip from New York to DC, and we started to outline what we thought it might look like to do a maturity measurement, metrics-based activity for metadata. I'm showing that on your screen because I'm going to try to get everybody used to this process. I sent it to you guys all in advance, and I've got 3 objectives for today, and then a process I'd like to suggest that we do. So my objectives are how are we going to communicate about metadata? So let's have a conversation about that. How are we going to measure things and measure things from our own objective perspective and for communication to our management? And then how are we going to capture best practice about metadata management and align that with the DMM model that now exists? So when I'm listening to this conversation, those are the objectives that I have in mind. The first step in this, of course, is this something that we all agree is useful, that we want to continue? And if so, therefore, what are we going to try to get out of it? What I'd like to do is kind of maybe start by getting some of your opinions about this problem before we jump into the document itself and into the themes behind it. So maybe you could give me your thoughts about how do you see this working? What's the benefit to you? What's the problem we're trying to achieve? Et cetera, et cetera.
Mike, this is Jim. I'm going to just dive in. In my experience, on the one hand, anybody who considers themselves a data practitioner has, value for metadata, but I think that most people would agree that that you don't know what someone's talking about necessarily when they use that term. That it could mean different things for different people, and I'm just thinking about your first objective, which is communication. I think that it would be very useful to get more clear about what we mean when we talk about metadata before we get into how we manage it.
We want to keep our head off the budgetary chopping block as well.
Yes.
So other thoughts out there?
And we have everybody off of mute on the meeting, but you just remember to unmute yourself if you're trying to talk. It'd be interesting to know if anybody's got wants to take a stab at
Hmm.
Oh, go ahead.
This is Jean Guthrie from the Hartford.
Hi, Jean.
Hi. I just thought I'd add to what Jim said about, well, how do you communicate? I often say that we've been doing metadata for many years, and we used to call it documentation. Now we're not really doing anything different, but we're trying to capture that information in an online tool that to which everyone can have access. So, and I often use the analogy of a library book as being a piece of metadata, and you can't use the catalog at a library. You can't find what you're looking for without getting to the metadata, which is in the catalog entry, so you can find what you're looking for. And those are just ways to approach it for people who may be scared by the word metadata.
Yeah, I would add to that, Gene, that as we begin to understand about precision of language, the need to communicate terms and definitions across our industry and to our regulators becomes essential. I mean, I don't think this is an option any longer for our industry. We have to do this. We don't really communicate about it very well.
No, so I agree with the objectives of what we're trying to do here. We all need that foundation about how are we going to talk about it, what is it really, what are we measuring, and how do you best go about it. So having a tool is one thing, and then figuring out what to do with metadata, what are the standards around it, how is it governed, that's another huge discussion. So you can't load it properly, you can't organize it in the tool and get it out to people if you haven't talked about how to govern it or what it is, how to organize it.
Other thoughts out there? Carol, the people over at Fannie Mae are saying they're having trouble getting into the webinar and need some assistance. So could you give Beth Hyatt a call?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm onto it. No problem.
Thank you so much.
So a library catalog is an example of metadata. What are some other, I've heard people use data dictionaries as metadata, metrics as metadata, which then begs the question of where do you stop, and what's useful.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we center it all at the Hartford around our data. So at the moment, we associate a term with a data element, and then that term can be expressed in multiple ways in our physical systems. So it's the same data, but existing in multiple places. And we use that term to what we call it a master name, actually. So it's the master term for all the data that is expressed by that definition. And then we try to gather other things, a recommended name. If you're going to implement it physically, use this name and these abbreviations. If it's out in a report, then let's not only associate that report field with the report or maybe the BI tool and somewhere in the data, but associate it with the meaning, the term. So you get kind of an end-to-end look at the data and what it is. And we're adding models to that. So of course the logical attribute the same attribute can exist in multiple models. We actually don't have an enterprise model. So by taking all the attributes and relating it to this one master term, we're working on building the enterprise model or finding one, an industry model, and then associating our data to that, but we're not quite there yet.
So the
Carol, you see all, excuse me for interrupting. Carol, you see all these people trying to get in and can't?
I got something from Jeff Gorball. He's trying to get in as well.
Just so that you know,
I'm
there's a capacity problem. I had to try 3 times. If they keep trying, it will eventually let them in.
there is no reason why this should be happening. I am emailing everybody with dial-in so people can get in on the phone, most definitely.
Yeah, it's a problem with GoToMeeting's server capacity.
But it shouldn't be over capacity because we've got...
Carol's got it. Don't you guys worry about it.
Okay.
We'll continue until when people join, they'll join. We'll figure out the technical stuff for next time. We apologize if it's a big problem. Okay. So Jim, you were having the discussion about the definition of the types of metadata that we care about.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was thinking, we're talking about. So what I heard Gene say is, definitely the terms, the definitions, the abbreviations, or any other alternate names associated with the term, all are all what you'd classify as metadata.
Plus,
go ahead.
yeah. Should I go on? Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Models, data models, database structures, reporting fields, business objects, universes, whatever reporting BI tool you're using, all that information. And the values associated with your data, so any data profiling results that you've done, and an evaluation of what those results mean in a business sense. Data quality rules, business rules. So we're very data focused, so anything around what the data is, how it's used, what it means.
And Gene, how well is that understood across your organization?
We're still in the early phases. So we have a new data management model that we're in the process of rolling out, so that even though many of these activities have been done before, and we have some of this information already in our adaptive repository, but it's not spread out across the enterprise. Going forward, we'll be able to capture new development, but legacy systems will get in there a little bit at a time, but probably never fully. It's just too big a task. But the objective would be, of course, to get a handle on everything that you have and concentrating on the data that's of the most importance.
All right, so why don't we take a look at, so this document we sent around, I tried to capture what I thought were the 4 core themes that I heard in the conversation both at the user group and during our trade ride. So let's just start top line and go down. Are these the right categories of things? Metadata quality, business value, the governance associated with it, and then technical implementation? Is that what we all think as well within your organizations? Anybody?
Sure. It works.
All right, so everybody's okay. I'm trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do with this activity, right? So my goal is to listen to you in terms of the challenges I think that you're facing trying to manage this the metadata and address it internally. So just want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly, because now I got to figure out what is it that we're going to try to do with these. In my own mind, one option that we can do is we can take each of these areas and follow what we did for our data management maturity process. And that would be to define each of these areas, put them in business context, write goals associated with them, identify core questions related to each one of these things, and then come up with ways of evaluating competency, against our levels of maturity. So that's one idea. But I wanted to make sure that I understood what it is you're thinking of.
Well, we're probably all thinking of the same thing. We're all struggling. All these questions.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
So it would be interesting to hear what.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Going through everything and along with the maturity model.
Yeah. So Gene, would you suggest that our goal is to capture best practice, to define what it is we're trying to do, and then use that for both best practice and for sharing amongst each other? Is that the overall objective here?
That works for me. Yes.
And one that we're interested in committing some time to do?
Yeah.
What about the rest of you?
This is Jennifer from Fidelity. I would support those goals as well, and also agree that I would commit some time to that.
So one of the, I guess I have two ways that we have done this in the past. The easiest one is a regularly scheduled conversation. We can take one area at a time and then start defining it according to that structure of the DMM. And that's fairly efficient. We can do this over GoToMeeting, regularly scheduled once every fortnight or something like that. If it gets if it gains some traction, we could then kick it into a higher gear, get some meetings together, and things of that nature. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mike, is it your thinking that the way you've organized these categories that they would that this is the way that metadata might fit in across the existing DMM structure, or that we're thinking that there might be a new kind of process area that we develop around metadata that's different than how we manage other data?
Things, Jim. I'm thinking two things. One is we want to enhance the DMM model as it relates to data definitions and metadata, of which it's mentioned quite a few times across the model.
Yes.
I also think that it's the whole DMM process is going to kick off areas of deeper research for the industry. So while it might not all be incorporated into the DMM itself, it should kick off some research topics for us.
Well, one area within the DMM I'll say that's an area of improvement is metadata, because for example, Gene included business rules as part of metadata. While we refer to business rules often, we don't really have a place to discuss and define business rules. So that would be a place where we could actually deal with business rules and also other things that qualify under the category of metadata.
Yeah, just as we started for data quality, defining the scope of what it is probably the right place to start. As you were all looking at these four themes, which ones are the highest priority in your mind? Maybe suggesting how we might approach this conversation.
I find vocabularies very interesting. I mean, we have books about data quality. We have Ron Ross for business rules, and we have Malcolm Chisholm who's talking about business terms and definitions, but it's not as well developed, not to my knowledge anyway. It's still, I think, fairly new, but I may be wrong.
So what do you mean, Gene, by vocabulary? You mean the way we talk about metadata or the metadata of the terms and definitions we use in our master files?
Right, the metadata of the terms and definitions. So how do we organize them? You throw it in a glossary. How do you organize those glossaries? If you have a large corporation, do you divide those terms into different areas? How do you note where they're applicable on an enterprise level in this specific business? How do you enable people to get at those terms? So I suppose that's an ontology.
Well, there's a lot of things embedded in that. One of them that
Yeah.
we struggle with is the definition of the core attributes versus the important attributes versus the nice attributes.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're thinking a lot about how the industry is doing that.
Mm-hmm. Good. I'd like to hear more about it.
The bottom line is we don't do it consistently across any of our organizations.
Yeah,
Makes it very difficult to align it with regulatory rules, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and very, very seldom is it managed as one of the things as metadata. One of the things I like about giving focus to metadata, if we can agree on some precise meanings of what that pertains to, is that it does give focus to the content, the semantic content, rather than getting too hung up with implementation and things like that. So with the core data attributes, we find that there are organizations that do keep track of data elements that are important for certain processes, but they're not consolidated into a unique list of terms and definitions that you could see get reused for various different applications throughout the organization. That's a missing step that we're trying to help the industry, make progress on. And sometimes by changing the terminology from just data management to metadata management, perhaps releases us from being too technology bound or too business context bound, and just kind of focus on the stuff that we're managing from a meta.
Go ahead, Mike.
And there's another important aspect to that, which is that the words that people use in different business units for the same concepts may be different. And so by using what you said just now, an ontology, a set of meaningful concepts with synonyms for the different words people use, means that you're decoupling the solving of that problem of common terminology from the problem of vocabulary. You can relate how different business units have different labels for the same concepts. So I think that's quite an important distinction to keep in mind.
Yep.
That becomes more, I've seen it become more and more relevant for organizations that are implementing business intelligence reporting across business units, where you now have people using a common infrastructure and trying to see data that's beyond the bounds of their business. So I think as we see more and more, that metadata will become more practical
And critical.
I'd like to add another concept into this conversation, and it's really just our own personal challenge. So we are in the process of taking our ontology, which is our financial industry business ontology, or FIBO, and creating an interface within the adaptive metadata manager to our membership. So it's really a perfect illustration of the challenge, because we're trying to understand what it is that how the industry will interact with the ontology. And we develop the ontology, we're not users of. So I'd love to get people who are interested in helping us kind of look at the interface to figure out how it relates to the way people are going to use FIBO. And I can kind of put that in the larger context, because I heard lots of conversations about the challenges of user interfaces themselves from metadata repositories to real people, and how we get kind of closer alignment of how you interact with metadata. So maybe we could use that as a case example if anybody's interested in helping.
Yeah, that would be really beneficial. What I noted from just what Gene was saying about metadata in terms of uses is, and I'm sure it's not limited to this, but metadata helps you find your data, understand your data, and control your data. I'm sure there's probably more, but those three came out. Mm-hmm. And if we can get a little bit more detailed on the different use cases, it probably helps convey the value and what we're trying to do.
And I think we need to kick up this value conversation, Jim, in a larger way, right? We have to figure out how to make sure that the world understands this ain't an option. This is really the critical baseline of how we manage our data, and our data is used to manage our processes. So we got to stop talking about it like it's some technical thing.
Right.
Right.
And also, to Jim's point, I think there's a couple of kinds of metadata. So if metadata is just data about data, some of that is about the provenance and the quality management and other aspects of the data. And some of it is about the nature of the data and what it represents and whether it's part of a physical model or a report or an ontology or a vocabulary or whatever. So there's those different kinds of metadata to deal with.
Actually, Mike, let me go back over those three you mentioned because I thought they were good. So you called it metadata about provenance. And that's business rules and quality assurance type of thing?
Yes. So if you've got a golden source for a particular, like for equities, you might be looking at this feed, and for debt, your golden source is that feed, and then where it comes together and where it gets into this report or that database.
And then the nature of data, that was more of a technical structure. Is that what what do you mean by nature of data?
Yeah. So the kind of meta model-y stuff. So if you've got metadata repository and you've got elements in a physical database, you've got elements in a message schema, you've got elements in a vocabulary, in an ontology, and so on. How those are distinguished, what is the data about data in that sense, the kind of the technical sense, if you like.
Yeah, no, I get it. And then the third one, I assume, was the content itself and the meaning of the content. So Gene, do you agree that are those the three that you see as well?
Well, sure. It's all about meaning and where your data starts, where what's the authoritative source, or if not authoritative, the original source, shall we say, where it goes, so that if it's being used in an end system, the people using that end system and making business decisions based on that information need to be able, especially in today's world, to have the ability to go back to the source and to know what happened to the data in between, what's been changing, what business rules have been applied, what quality, data quality, whatever rules, how has the data been transformed, and
data lineage.
The data lineage. Yeah. So what
does it mean? But there's also a fourth one that I heard you say, Gene, unless it falls in one of these other three, is the things that the metadata that you need that supports someone finding it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I'm hearing three things. I'm trying to put these in buckets, and let's see if there's three or four. One is what Mike called provenance, and that's business rules, quality assurance, sourcing, where there's the source of, usage about, lineage, all of that I'd put under the category of provenance. The content itself, what it means, and what it means in context of relationships that exist, and then the technical nature of it. So, Jim, I don't think that the fourth category of the cataloging is covered by any of that.
Right.
Mike, can I interrupt as well with a couple of questions? There are people who there is a central problem on GoTo. There are people who are on the line who cannot speak, but have been able to get in and following locally to themselves. A question from Nick Helton. He would like our focus to be on metadata governance as step one. I'm going to read this out as he said. It will help us with high-level principles that are useful for an audience that has various needs. Going into the details seems to be a bad course given our audience size. And then a comment also from Melanie Mecca. We need to make a distinction between metadata and data standardization. These are related, but they're not the same. With metadata, the organization needs to determine what information it needs to collect, maintain, store, publish, and govern metadata in the key categories: business, technical, process, operational. This is both a business orientation and a physical data management orientation, e.g. data lineage in the implemented data layer. The organization needs to determine what metadata is important. Standardization of business data.
Okay, hang on. Don't go all into it. I hear you.
Okay.
There is a issue between the distinction between metadata and data standardization. That's important, and we'll capture that.
Okay.
What I'm more interested in is why can't people get in, and how do we fix that for the future? I'm trying to get this framed right now.
No, absolutely. This is a problem with GoTo. I don't know why. I have no idea at the moment. I cannot investigate it while we're live any more than what we're doing. We're just trying to get people to be able to hear. But it's a problem with GoToMeeting.
So I guess my question, Carol, is do you think this is a one-time isolated problem that we can fix, or we need to find an alternative strategy?
I think we need to look at it and find out what the problem is, because we've not had problems like this before using this service.
Okay, so the idea of kind of focusing in, once we frame metadata and its dimensions and dynamics and what is it, which I think is really important. The other suggestion was about the governance structure around it, and I assume that is how do we position it, how do we manage it. And the things that are in this document, if you will. How does that resonate with those of you who can talk?
Well, good.
So I think that if I'm hearing this correctly, there's probably value in getting some agreement on the buckets of, the types of, and the definition of metadata, so we have a language about it. Right, Jim? I think we found that about data quality overall.
Yes.
And then after we do that, we can take a look at the governance side, because really this is about positioning of metadata within our organizations as something that's essential and to be managed.
Yes.
Okay, so does that sound reasonable to you guys out there?
Yes.
I have Mike. I have a comment from Mike.
So Melanie, if you're listening, I'm sorry, Melanie, if you're listening, I'm going to include these distinctions between metadata, data definitions, and data standards as part of this upfront defining challenge. So I hear the point. Go ahead, Carol.
From Malcolm Chisholm, he's on the line again, can't be heard. He has 3 points. We need a subject area model of metadata. The topic is just too large. The second point is that he does have such a thing, and he's prepared to provide it to further the discussion.
We accept. Thank you, Malcolm. Next.
And the third point, we need an agreed upon definition of metadata. Again, he has one and can provide it.
We always like suggestions, and we're good at ripping and repairing. So by all means, provided we're going to do this transparently and just make it available for everybody to provide comment on. So just a small technical question that I have. When I look at our website, I think metadata could fit in either best practices data quality, it could fit into data management maturity, or it could fit into our own metadata activity 5.0. What makes sense to people in terms of where we should store this information? Because we're getting, things like Malcolm's contribution. Because that is going to be the repository of where I'm going to put this stuff.
I would say not 5.0 because that only deals with one aspect and one kind of metadata.
Yep. So that's a not 5.0. So data quality and DMM are the concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, what do you think?
Possibly, well, I think we could retain the option of both, because in where I see the difference is that if DMM is about the high level, the breadth of a particular area and the things that you expect that people do, and I would hope that we would get into that. But then in data quality, it seems more about actual things, definitions, or things that pertain to data quality that we agree upon. So resources, if you will. So I think there's the potential to store different things in different places depending on which way we take this. But DMM would be my first choice because it's broader.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning to that as well. Does anybody have an objection if we use this part of our website to kind of add a bit of a metadata security segment to it, and we'll just use that as a repository? Carol, does that work for you?
Absolutely, yes, it does.
Hi, Carol and Mike, can you hear me? This is Beth. Hi,
yes.
Oh, wow. Woo.
A fresh voice.
Yeah, sorry.
Somebody made it through.
We've been trying for 40 minutes to get online, so we finally were able to do it through an iPad, so our apologies.
Well, welcome. So I think that we have you been following the conversation, or I could summarize it for you if you like.
We followed the early part, and then we got busy trying to solve for the connection point, so we probably missed the last 10 minutes or so.
I think here's what I hear so far. We're going to manage this kind of according to the DMM development process, which was a documentation, a lesson for us on how this stuff should work, and we did it kind of open, shared screen, making notes, going through definition, goals, objectives, and measurement criteria as a way of capturing. And aligning it with that process, I think, would be smart.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start with a definition discussion, because there's still a lot of all over the map. What is it? What subject areas? What types? What categories? Then we've got Malcolm Chisholm, who said he'll start that and send us some of his own stuff for us to rip and repair. And that from that, we're going to delve into governance as the top priority, because it's essential to get it positioned correctly within the minds of the stakeholders.
Agreed. Yeah.
Mike.
I think.
Yeah, Carol, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in as people send me notes just so that I do address them. Nancy Peterson has just come back and said that they don't agree with putting it under DMM, as it has a technology component that doesn't exist under DMM.
Okay, well, that's.
We do have a technology section within the DMM.
This is really about where the thing is going to sit in our website, right? So I only have a few options. So it's either data quality or DMM. I'm open. We can hold that until next time when we can all argue in front of each other. Because we can move it around, Carol, I assume.
Absolutely. You tell me where it to go.
It's a source for the industry, so I don't really care where it goes, but we'll leave that as an open question.
So Mike, this is Beth from Fannie Mae. So The one thing I think that we're struggling with in the conversation, certainly in New York, was centered around is, you know, as you look within your companies and you're launching metadata programs, one, it's the articulation of the definition of metadata. It's the ability to articulate the value add to the business. In addition to that, it's the ability to measure, once you've launched your program, it's the ability to measure your maturity against some model that will help you get to a higher level of metadata management. So when you're typically starting in the metadata space, you're just trying to do the basics. You're trying to centralize metadata. You're trying to get to standard definitions. You're trying to just simply manage glossaries in a consistent way across the organization. As you move up the maturity scale, you know, you really want to look at opportunities for operational metadata for your applications to begin to benefit off of a consistent set of metadata and business rules and so forth. So that's kind of, you know, from our perspective, where we are and where we want to be. Just to kind of, I just wanted to share that just from where we sit on the Fannie Mae side. It's really we have an interest in being able to articulate as we are building and maturing the program, being able to quantify that as we move up the maturity scale.
Well, I think, Beth, what you've defined is, in fact, the output of the process.
Right.
So as we capture that, what we're going to do is try to put it into maturity categories of what would be expected or what is our goal as we improve our maturity of metadata management. So while the beginning might be simply defining core definitions, by the time you are a more mature organization, you're going to have all that operational stuff captured.
Right.
So I think that is the goal, of being able to figure out, all right, so how do we measure the maturity of it at our various levels?
And Mike, this is Samra, and another dimension to that, or another approach would be, where do we start, right? And I think the tendency usually is to start, I think we're unusual in that we try to start with sort of a business vocabulary, right, and take it from there. But I think normally the approach is to start with a technology stack, right? Bring in your database, bring in your BI layer, bring in your logical if you have it, right? So the one thing that I think would be helpful is, as we are defining...
Wait a minute, Samra, are you recommending the technical, or are you suggesting...
I am not. No. I'm not recommending. I'm just saying I think that's the tendency in majority of the companies. What I'm suggesting is, I think we should have an opinion as part of this body of work. Where is the right place to start? Because I think the only way we can gain some sort of a consensus and be able to measure this across the industry is to have a same place to start, right? So just a suggestion and kind of build from there, right? So let's assume.
Don't we always start with a business requirement and a business objective?
No. We don't, most people don't. A lot of time.
Oh, well, we'll rephrase. Don't for successful activities. Don't we start with?
Yes, for successful ones.
Yeah, Mike. But I don't want to dismiss this technical. Why people do that from a technical perspective, right? Because they have a very specific issue in their warehouse or in the BI environment, right? And they need to deploy something.
Well, they start technically because the technical people understand the value,
right,
and then do it.
Right.
So just because they're the ones who are wiser doesn't mean that's the right place to start for organizational buy-in.
Exactly, right? But that said, I think if we have an opinion collectively as for this maturity model to say, okay, maybe you start there, but that's really not the right place to start at the enterprise level. The one thing that I want to make sure, at least from our perspective, we are only, this maturity model should be focused for enterprise metadata, right? Which has an implication that it's shared metadata across the enterprise. Because you still will have these different pockets that people have to manage metadata, and if it doesn't impact the rest of the organization, then we shouldn't get in their business, right? It's the shared enterprise metadata that I think we need to have an opinion. Where's the best place to start, and how do we grow it over time so we can measure it, to Beth's point earlier? Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense, Samara. I think actually I'm going to modify it slightly in my mind. It's really, where do you start to ensure the organization's buy-in to the objectives of metadata, so that it's not one side against another or fighting for your survival. It really becomes a core integrated part of the organization's operation. I mean, from my perspective now, watching the industry, I don't know how anybody can do anything correctly without getting control over the underlying foundations of data, which is really about what metadata is.
Yes.
And we're not presenting that story, in my opinion, very well across our industry.
So I think the starting point, this is a little vague, and I'll see if I can get a little more specific, but I think the starting point would look something like a combination of what we believe is the right starting point, just from what we've learned, combined with some addressing some kind of common problem that we know most organizations experience, and whether that's requirements definition.
Hey, can you spell Basil?
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, connecting a specific problem with how we think that one should start. I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm thinking, because we don't want to, as I can't remember who said it, but we don't want to slip into just documenting how people normally think about it, because I think the problem is that if it starts off in the wrong place, it's never going to get to where it needs to be. And what I was hearing is that if you start in just talking about it in technology terms, you're just never going to get to the point that you really need to get to have a real conversation.
You know, so I think we got the topic.
Yeah.
I think that topic is, in fact, part of the governance discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to put it right up front in terms of, you know, the kinds of things we're going to want to capture, at least in our initial discussions, and including positioning of it and how you get alignment before you start building something is probably a worthwhile conversation to have.
Right. Mike?
Michael, go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of contributions from Pete Rivette, who is also mute on the call. Firstly, to say that there's an organization called Dharma that has a dictionary of data management terms which covers metadata and also a data management body of knowledge. Also, there's a thing called DMBOK, which has a 30-page...
Yeah, so I have the DMBOK, and he says that metadata definitions are embedded in that?
Yes.
Good. Also, I will extract from and provide that for next meeting. Good. Next point. Thank you for that.
Those were them.
Oh, that was it. That was the point. So it's embedded within the DMBOK.
Yeah,
That's
and just
fantastic.
to say, we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Malcolm's going to send his stuff. I will try to extract from the DMBOK as well for some definitional stuff. Did you have something else you wanted to contribute there, Mike? That was it. Okay.
Hey, Mike. This is Beth again. So I was just saying to Samara, I'm sure we probably have some stuff that we could send along your way if it's helpful as well.
Well, in fact, if anybody has some underlying definitional activities that they want to send, I will try to assemble that and get it ready for us for next meeting. While we're speaking about next meeting, let me see when we could possibly schedule this. Does this week, which is pretty clear for me, the week of the 22nd, so maybe we could think about this, let me ask, should we think about this monthly, weekly, every other week? Will we leave those two, or something else?
Mike,
For those of you who can speak, what do you think?
Mike, from our perspective on the Fannie Mae side, I think biweekly would be great, just to keep the momentum going.
So kind of we could carve out 1 hour every other week for a while and see what happens.
Right, and then as we have traction in progress, then perhaps moving to monthly would be great from our side.
And then, Mike, if in these sessions, if we can kind of carve out a body of work and assign it to different people, so this way some of the work can be done outside the meeting, and then we'll come back and present. Just a thought.
No, I agree with that. In fact, what we should do is look at the section of this discussion that we're managing, ask people who are willing to commit to give some thought to it, to come prepared for next meeting with a proposal, because that's the way you expedite, you make progress. So we're certainly going to share the labor. And speaking of sharing the labor, Jim, I'm traveling for the next 3 weeks, so you're it.
That's fine. So I will set up a meeting in 2 weeks from now.
So what is 2 weeks from now? Let's see, today, that would be the 17th. Yeah. Actually, could you just, for this first one, can we skip it to the 24th? Because I'd like to be there if I could. And then we'll do it every fortnight after that.
Mike, don't we have the EDM Council members meeting on the 18th?
No.
No?
No,
Not unless it's in London.
No, there isn't one on the 18th.
Okay.
That was one we were hoping to do, but it's not.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
But it does raise a good point, because I think we should try to do a little bit of investigation this way, and then do a face-to-face.
Yeah, that was my point.
So why don't I try to get the 24th will be the next meeting, and then we're going to go every 2 weeks after that. And then we're going to try to do a face-to-face as soon as possible to get everybody all charged up. But I think I'd like to have a little bit more substance around or structure around the process to make sure that we know what we're doing. Okay, so let me summarize what I think I heard, and then people can correct it. Best practices are outcome as well as a mechanism for sharing. So this is business network focused on metadata, resulting in best practice documentation aligned with DMM, and that'll include the way of measuring maturity. We're going to talk about the definition of metadata so we get at least a common language with which to have this discussion. Malcolm's going to send his stuff. I'm going to try to pull from the DM BOC. I heard Beth and Samra say they've got some things, and anybody else who has some of that foundational work done, I would be grateful to receive it, and we will try to assemble it for the 24th, and maybe we could lock in an agreement on the definition of metadata from that meeting. The first big area that we're going to focus in on is going to be governance related. It'll include things like positioning within our organization. That includes, Samara, where is the right place to start and how do you get these things underway, and how metadata then gets managed as a organizational value within the organization. That's what I heard. Anything else so far, Mike? Go ahead.
Yes, there's two more points from the chat and questions. So Pete Rivette says it's not just the definitions for metadata management, but also the process of metadata management. Frank Lemieux asks, are we going to establish metrics for measuring the business value of metadata as Samra suggested? And he also says they have definitions for 6 different kinds of metadata which they can share.
Well, certainly business value can get subsumed as part of a governance objective. I'm not so sure that it's going to remain that way because I think the measurement of and the metrics associated with will be large enough on its own, but we can determine that as it grows. I didn't fully understand the process comment. So do you understand that, Mike? Because what does a process mean in terms of definition unless we are using, and I guess it was Gene's ideas of provenance, nature of data, content, and cataloging. Is that what you think he means by process?
Right. This is in the context of not wanting to reinvent the wheel. So what I believe he's saying is that we're looking to these other sources, and we said we look to these other sources for definitions, but actually we should be looking for those other sources not just for definitions, but for understanding the process of data management. And in fact, that DMBOK has 30 pages covering the process itself.
Okay. Well, no, I'm good with that. Aligning data management with the process of is one of our approaches as well. So I think we're all in alignment there. We apologize for the technical difficulties. We will fix this before next meeting. We have done this with many people in the past. We know it works. I'm just going to assume it's my fault. So we will fix it for next time. We will make sure that everybody can dial in. I will try to write this up and get it structured for our next meeting on the 24th. I'm going to assume that 11 o'clock works for everybody. So I guess last word is, anybody want to lobby for anything different than 11 o'clock?
No, that's fine, Mike, from our perspective.
Apologies once again for technical problems. I thought it was a good start. I think I got the sense of where you guys want to take this. We'll write it up and get it out to you as soon as we can, and we'll talk to you again on this on the 24th. In the meantime, anything and everything, please send my way.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Carol, is it okay for me to close out, or do you need me to do anything?
No, we're done.
Okay, good. All right.
I think Carol's run, so presumably any of us can close it. I'll
Okay.
take the chat log.
So I have the option to leave or end. I guess I'll click end the webinar.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.